Hello, everybody. I'm going to pause the record real quick. All right, everybody. I am, kind of on pins and needles about this one because this has been a long time in the making. I am really, really happy to be able to talk to you about these subjects and also to have Argel here. So say hello, Argel.
Hey everyone.
I will tell the story of how I met Argel briefly pretty soon. But the subject of today's session is how to attract, hire, and retain amazing staff. And there's a lot to talk about this. We could do full day, multiple days of webinars on this topic. So we're going to, by necessity, be going pretty fast through some things. And we've got a follow-up scheduled for next week that we'll talk about in a moment. But just some quick housekeeping things. There is both a chat and a Q&A. If you have a question that you want us to return to, that could be something that would be useful for everybody to hear about in terms of responses, please use the Q&A for that. And if you just want to, compliment Argel on his dapper suit, things like that, put that in the chat. And I will also say, Argel, you're looking suave.
Thank you.
Yeah. I'm a little insecure right now, but that's okay.
Yeah, should I take it off?
No, it's great. No. Keep it close on. All right. All right. So let's dive in. A lot of you know me, so I'm not going to belabor this. I was the marketing director of a multi-state, multi-million-dollar tax practice. We had over 400 employees at, kind of the peak of busy season. We had a bunch of seasonal folks in the corporate office. 20 or so in the corporate office, and then obviously, 15 different offices across 3 different states. And so we had all kinds of full-timers. Hiring and training was a big deal, and I've not talked about this very often. I've been speaking and teaching to the tax and accounting world since 2003, and this is the very first time that I've done this publicly and not just for clients. So you guys know the Tax Pro Marketer story. I'm not going to dive into that too much. A lot of you have heard that before, but I want to quickly introduce Argel. So Argel is a CPA that we met at the AICPA Engage show in June, I think it was, this year. And we have actually spent a lot of time together over the last 3 or 4 months. It's not the normal process. Obviously, we get to know our clients pretty well and hear their kind of target clientele and do a bunch of meetings with them and try to dive in on particular strategies. But the reason why I've got Argel on this call is he's unlocked a door that I think is going to be a really interesting door for some of you to walk through. It's one that probably some of you have looked at and have never really found the right guide to bring you through. And I'm here to tell you that what Argel has done is something that all of you can model, and also you can get direct help from him in implementing. So being a little bit coy and mysterious as I do, so be it, that's fine. We're going to kind of open the kimono here pretty soon. But I want to in the first part of this conversation, I want to tell you a little bit about what we've unlocked here at Tax Pro Marketer. Now, there's obviously some differences in what we do here versus what you were doing in a tax and accounting practice. And I've worked in a tax and accounting practice, so I recognize that, setting up a Google business profile and optimizing it and building websites and doing social media and writing emails and deploying them and handling marketing campaigns on pay-per-click side, that's obviously a little different than, K2 work and, creating workflows for different tax return preparation, etc. So I recognize the difference. However, I do want you to understand that I think there's actually a lot of commonalities between what we do here from a staffing and operational flow standpoint versus what you were doing there. So when I started Tax Pro Marketer back in 2007, and it's unfortunate I don't have Troy Lakey, our COO, here with me talking about this, but we've done similar sessions where we've dove pretty deep with our existing clients, which you can find all of you have access to the members area on our website. You can go back and listen to some recordings that we've had on this topic. But I want to tell you some thumbnail stories about Tax Pro Marketer. When I started this back in 2007, I had the idea that I was going to be like 1 or 2 employee operation, build it to 7 figures, and have a lifestyle kind of business. And very quickly, I realized that if I was going to serve my clients well, and I'm in a service business, I needed to adopt a different mentality because I had come from a consulting background. I'd come from a lot of coaching, consulting, working with CPAs and practitioners for 4 or 5 years in that context, and doing an agency, doing marketing services on behalf of my clients. Again, very similar to tax and accounting services. I realized that I needed people who were effective and well-trained. And so I was very fortunate that the first person that I really hired was a complimentary person to me. And that, I think, is one of the very first, most critical steps that you can take in your practice, is identifying your particular skills and recognizing what are the complementary skills that I need to have a full suite of leadership in a burgeoning, growing practice. And I stumbled upon that. I had the choice, I've written about this in recent emails, I had the choice of hiring somebody that was a lot like me, or finding somebody who, again, was complementary in skill set. And so I'm a salesperson, I am somebody who is a writer, I'm a communicator, I'm a visionary leader, I'm a builder, I am a dreamer, I'm a thinker, I'm a strategist. I needed an operational person. And I realized pretty fast that I could play in those worlds. I mean, I actually, everything that we do here at Tax Pro Marketer, at one point for sometimes years at a time, I was working directly in. Now we have 20 employees. It's a very different kind of operation. We hit the Inc. 5000, but everything I've done, I've been in the trenches on, but I also have to recognize my limitations, that I am not an operational person by nature. I am not somebody who's going to be, drawing out workflows and gets animated and excited, kind of going into a cave to create these workflows and go into, the tech stack and building out the minutia of the different things that we do from an automation standpoint. Fortunately, I found somebody who was that. Now, there were two of us at that point. We had the choice at that point, how were we going to grow together? Now, for 4, 5, 6 years, we kind of slapped things together. I was, I think, wise in giving my operational person the full portfolio for hiring and training from the very beginning, because we needed operational people. We needed people who were going to be in the trenches and working on behalf of our clients, serving them well. And I gave him that kind of full portfolio. He hired a bunch of part-timers. We started growing, and there's a reason why I'm telling this story, because I want to kind of give you a bit of a timeline of our growth so that you can find yourself, along the way in your practice. So probably about 6 or 7 years in of operating this company, we realized that we were at an inflection point. We were about $1 million in revenue or so, and we had a couple full-timers, but it was a lot of people wearing lots of different hats, and a lot of us spread all over the place. And we realized that if we were going to build something that would not require us to work 70, 80 hours a week, we needed to identify leadership and create culture. And once we started realizing that and building towards that, and building kind of a tiered system within our agency and our practice, that's when things really began to work smoothly. And I'm really shortcutting and thumbnailing a lot because I really want to get to what Argel has to say, but I also want you to know that there's stages in your business, there's stages in your practice, and there are decisions that you make. Maybe a lot of you are solo practitioners, a lot of you might be 1 or 2 employees at most, and then during tax season you might have a couple seasonal people that come alongside you. There's different kinds of hires that you make at different stages in your practice. And so Argel and I might talk about various systems for management and hiring and recruitment and what have you, and it might not be appropriate for you. Some of you might just be solo practitioners who need that first hire, who need that first person who can be that complementary person for you, and you're having a really hard time finding that in this marketplace. I understand. Some of you are at that inflection point where we were, where you've got 2 or 3, 4 people working within your practice. You're kind of throwing some mud against the wall, seeing what sticks. You're wearing a lot of hats. You're putting out a lot of fires. You as the owner are probably in a lot of the client work. You're not just signing off on returns, but you're actually in it doing a lot of preparation work. You're doing some of the accounting work on a monthly basis for business clients. I mean, there's that inflection point where you have to decide, like, am I going to build a practice that can scale beyond my time? Or am I just going to create people? And Argel, please interrupt if you see different inflection points that I'm not identifying. Or am I going to build something that actually scales, to a real business? Because there's things that we do and there's hires that we make to support us when we are still kind of glorified freelancers in a sense. And we'll have a couple people that will help us optimize our time. Especially if we bill by the hour, we want to make sure that all of our hours are billable, right? And let the kind of internal team handle some of the nitty gritty of the running of the business or what have you, and the client communication, what have you. But there's that. Go ahead.
I was just agreeing with you, everything that you're saying, even though you're in marketing, as a firm owner, I experienced the same thing as far as, finding at the very start, finding someone you can trust, right? That can complement you. And then at some point you do have an inflection point where you have to think about beyond just you doing the work, right? You have to have a team.
Right. Thank you. I'm glad that what I'm saying is resonating to the whole industry, because I do believe that there's a lot of commonalities in service businesses, which is what we're all operating in terms of how we find and train staff. And so when we hit that inflection point, we started leaning into culture. We started leaning into our vision and values and our SOPs and the tech stack that we were building on the backside, and creating real processes for how we communicate with one another and with clients. And we brought on Help Scout online, which basically enables us to have a ticketing system on our back end, so we're able to organize the flow of communication, and clients don't necessarily have to engage in a ticketing system, which, by the way, I do highly recommend that tech versus other kind of, if you've got a multiplicity of clients, if you've got hundreds of clients, I do recommend Help Scout. There's other kind of platforms out there, but having clients not engage with portals all the time, but actually can email you, but it on your back end, it feels like a portal. It's a beautiful game changer. Anyway, so we were like 5 or 6 people. We started leaning into culture. We started growing again. We kind of stayed in that 5 or 6 employee place for about 4 or 5 years. And then again, we hit a different inflection point where we were building something where we had multiple tiers within our organization, and not just, Troy and I at the top and everybody below, but Troy and I at the top, and then a leadership team, and then like a semi-flat structure with that leadership team and the people working below them. But there's hires that you have to make along the way. We found a lot of success in finding people like beginning in the part-time roles, like especially stay-at-home moms. We found a lot of success in people coming out of full-time ministry, because that's where my background was, and Troy's as well, who were kind of like in a career change mode. And a lot of you maybe aren't tapped into sort of like full-time ministry refugees, but you might be around a lot of people who want to make a switch from blue collar to white collar. And you might find that there's a great number of people who like that kind of transition. Now, notice that I'm not necessarily talking about like finding trained accountants, finding trained marketers. We've made one hire here of somebody who was like high level, and that's Ben Grootman, who's now our director of innovation. That was an interesting scenario. We brought him in part-time as well in the beginning. Now he's full-time, high level salary, etc. But anyway, I'm kind of getting derailed in the story. Shut up, Nate. Go ahead. Argel, yes.
I was going to break it down a little bit, with what you said, because of this different inflection point. I think it's helpful for other practitioners out there. At some point you do create these SOPs, and you do try to create a firm that can scale, right? And part of that is really so that you can hire behind technical people, right? Like what you said, being able to hire in different industry. Like if you have a really strong SOP and you have really strong process, that's super helpful. But secondly, you also don't want to trade labor for money, right? Like you want to be able to not hire every time you get 3 more clients. You want to be able to be efficient. You want to be able to increase the average revenue that your staff can generate, right? And that's through the process. And then the second part of what you said, I thought is also interesting, is the culture building. And I think this is where I think you're going to go and talk about being able to retain those talent, right? Because as practitioner, it feels like one step forward, two steps back when we try to build somebody and build a team, and then we lose them, right? So I think that's where I think culture is like really important as well.
Right. So I'm going to get into that, and believe me, I am going to shut down pretty soon and give the con to Argel, because just you guys probably can tell it's unusual for me to bring somebody like him into this context who, you know, is in your seat. Maybe I've only got somewhat limited experience, but it's been deep with him. But the reason why that's the case is Argel has unlocked something that I think is going to be really, really interesting for all of you to learn about. So now, skipping forward, again, 20 employees, we've got interns, we've actually got employees overseas, and that's the story that I'll tell a little bit later as well. Not just people who've lived here in Kansas City, who've moved overseas, but also people that we've sourced overseas. We've got about 13 here domestically and 7 overseas, and I'll explain a little bit more about how we manage that in a minute. But what I want to do briefly is give some bullet points on these 3 categories that we've discovered along the way, some of which I've already kind of touched on, but I want to talk about the 3 different categories of attract, hire, and retain. And this is something that I think all of you need to be thinking about within each of these categories, whatever stage you're at. If you are by yourself, it's time to think about attracting and hiring. And if you already have people on your team and maybe you're in like an inflection point where like you can't grow anymore unless you hire, well, pay attention, because I think the things that we've discovered along the way will help. And I know a little bit about what I'm talking about. I'm not going to post the link to our Glassdoor rating. I've had employees that have worked with us for like over 10 years. I've got like 3 employees that have been with me for over 10 years. I've got a group of employees 5 to 10 years. We don't lose our people. Some of that is, again, that culture piece that we've talked about, but it's also we've created something here that has its own kind of culture of joy that has prompted a bunch of people in the marketing agency world to invite me and Troy to speak, to talk about these things. And this is the first time that we've shared some of these things with kind of the public tax and accounting industry. So attracting talent. First of all, I've already alluded to this. Recognize where you are and what are your goals, especially as we peer into 2023, look ahead to tax season. If you do a lot of compliance work in particular, you know, you've got to recognize like, what's your capacity for return preparation personally? And do you want to be doing the 500 returns you might have done this past tax busy season, right? Or do you want to recognize what's happening in the industry, seeing some of the demographic shift that's happening around here, realize that like, this is the time to build an empire. And I don't use that language lightly. I mean, there's so many there's a lot of opportunity right now in our industry. And I tell you, like, this is the time to build a foundation that will enable you to have thousands and thousands and thousands of clients that are happy. This is the time to build for that, because there are people selling their practices, there are people aging out of the industry, there are clients looking for better practices, especially if you've got good marketing. I mean, it's good out there for our industry. So from an attracting standpoint, when we're talking about talent, if you're in that initial stage, you've just got a couple people, I definitely urge you to not necessarily look to Indeed or some of these kind of like, you know, LinkedIn or whatever, different places where you might put a listing. I would start with your personal network from like, whether it's a church community you might be involved in, other social situations, and just start kind of putting the word out that you are looking for somebody who can, you know, work in your practice. Because I will tell you, there are a lot of people who are dissatisfied with their work right now, and it may sound like it's a boring kind of job to work in a tax or accounting practice, but there's a lot of people out there, waiters, stay-at-home moms, people in the service, you know, the like retail service professional industries, not professional, like service industries, that are great hard workers who are smart, that can be trained. And we'll talk about that in the hiring slide in a minute. But I would like start passive radar now and spread your net wide, especially in your natural networks. And then once you've got 1 or 2 people that you are like are working well, put in place a employee referral program. And a lot of times good employees will bring other good employees. That's what we found. Pretty much, I think 90% of our employees come in through referrals from our existing awesome employees. So there's that. Then, and I'm going fast because again, I want to get to what Argel has for you. But from a hiring standpoint, a big mistake that a lot of people make with hiring is that they look at the skill set, they look at the CV, they look at the certifications, and they don't think about culture fit and work ethic. And I'll tell you, I mean, what we do here is very technical, just as technical as what you're doing from like a software tech stack standpoint, from a numbers standpoint. I mean, we have very technical work that we do at a marketing agency side. And we definitely put people through testing as it relates to like their ability to manage different tech things and numbers, what have you. But the main thing that we're looking for is work ethic and culture. And when people make bad hires, it's when they ignore those two things. So, Argel, it looks like you
I wanted to
say
say something because I made this mistake early on that I thought I came from Big Four, and so I thought I needed to hire somebody from Big Four. And just a few months after talking to people, it's like I would never hire somebody from Big Four, only because they're super technical. But that's all. They're just so specialized that they don't know how to run a business or look at the other aspect of the business or the different service line that we're helping clients. And so definitely very technical, but not fit at all, especially for small to medium-sized business, I would say, because they're already they only know one thing. They went from college to working with big companies, big teams, and that just wasn't a good fit for us.
Now, a lot of people are needing people to just like free up their time. And so there's a lot of need, I think, just for like an assistant level kind of hire for a lot of people on this webinar, I would imagine. People who can be in their inbox, handle their flow of communication. And what that requires is work ethic, good communication skills, and ability to triage. I mean, it's not necessarily something that you need high level accounting knowledge for. These are roles that you can train people to, and there's great resources out there to train people to. They don't need certifications. Now, some of you CPAs, EAs, like you can have junior staff plug in numbers and build out the return, and then you just do a quick review. I mean, that's what we did at our tax practice, and we had 23,000 plus clients, okay, in that tax practice, okay? Now, obviously, this was 20 years ago, seasonal staff, and it was a different kind of era in the tax industry, and we were a seasonal tax business, so we were not dealing with as many complicated returns as a lot of people are now, especially with the complexity of the tax code in the last 15 years. Nonetheless, there's a lot that can be done by junior accountants, junior staff, that really is a multiplying effect for your team. Now, if you do need that senior accountant, if you do need senior staff, this is where I recommend getting creative. And boy, do I have a creative option for you here, but we're going to talk about that. But I'll tell you on our side, again, we kind of started out with the senior hires that we needed to make with some part-time side hustle type relationship, independent contracting, etc. So, looks like Philip said, Argel, maybe, I'll turn down my gain because I think I'm really loud. There we go. That way it's not so overpowering. Thank you, Philip. All right, so get creative with the senior staff stuff. Last thing on the hiring side, resumes are just, BS. Experience and, character is all. And there's lots of different testing that you can do. We actually use the Enneagram, which is an interesting, testing thing. We've also used Myers-Briggs, and we've done a bunch of different kind of work style testing as well, the DISC. We've done these different profiles. That is a lot more dispositive than, what school somebody went to or what their particular experience was. So from the hiring side, and when you're interviewing, ask open-ended questions. Don't ask real specific questions. You want to see how people will respond to kind of problem-solving scenarios, All right, and then looking for complementary parts, I've already talked about that. Okay, retaining, I'm going to kind of go through this pretty fast because talking about culture is a whole different topic. We have real clear vision and values. And I will say that if you're having a hard time with your internal communications on your team and your the feeling, the vibe around your practice, you might want to look at clearly identifying your communication protocols and clearly identifying like what you do with your team to, I mean, like at the end of the day, like culture problems are your fault as an owner, and it's the pace that you are setting. One of the culture points that we talk about a lot with our team that we kind of like took for granted for the first decade, but then the last 5 years we really speak and train to it a lot, is like how you escalate problems. And so we have a value that, you know, when there's a problem, find the way before escalating. And then also for the leadership, honor workload before delegating. And so it's like an up and down value where like somebody like me or Troy or some of our leadership team, we can't just dump our crap on like the junior people in our company. We have to be mindful of their workflow, and that creates like a mutuality to our experience, so that, you know, if they're going to escalate something to us, like we trust on their side that they're not just kind of like dumping their problems up and we're not just dumping our problems down. That's just one example of the kind of specificity that I think a lot of people don't put into place. You can have amazing tech stack, you can have Slack and like clear protocols there. You can tell people when to email, when to text, you know, when to send an email or when to direct message or what have you, when to create, you know, a project in your particular project management software. You can have all that clear, but if you also don't speak about like when do you escalate, when do you not, what do you do before you escalate? Things like that you need to get clear on. So that's culture. Retaining talent. I don't pay like six-figure salaries for all of my people. And there's very few people here who actually are in a six-figure kind of modality, even though we're a multi-million-dollar practice, okay? But I've found that even more than just paying like amazing salaries, what can really make a huge difference with retaining great people is recognizing those moments where you can be generous in a little bit goes a long way. Like when a staff member has put in amazing work on a particular project, or like you can see that they're on the edge of burnout. I'll give them a company card and say, hey, take your spouse out to dinner. On me, you know, no restaurant is too nice. Just go to the nicest restaurant in town. A couple $100, but it like makes a massive difference in morale. Or, hey, you've been working really hard, take the rest of this day off. I got your workload, you know, I'm on it. Little things like that will do so much more than a 5 to 10K bump in salary, because you recognize that they're a real person and that they're not just kind of like building your own empire. It's really, really, really a powerful tool in your toolbox. And then lastly, the last point that I'll make before I kind of pass things on to Argel to talk about his model and like something a little bit more specific, I think, for your practice, is that annual reviews. If you're not doing these create pathways where like there's moments where I've had an employee for a few years and I feel like I know them well. I feel like I have like, you know, crack the code for that employee and I'm treating them well. There's like a good energy between us. I love their work. They seem to love working here. But if I don't take the time to give them kind of an opportunity to give me feedback and basically like open the door to create pathways for critique of me, I don't hear what I need to hear. As a leader, we have to recognize there's power differentials. Even if it's a small, kind of fairly flat organization that you might be involved in, you're an employer, and unless you create safe zones for people to like critique their experience, there's going to be simmering problems under the surface that you have no idea are really there. And they will kind of creep out in pressure-filled moments, and you'll realize, oh, that's kind of weird. Oh, well, you know, and you move on. But when you create a rhythm of annual review, and this is how we do those, we do 3 by 3. And so we ask the employee to give 3 bullet points to 3 questions. The first is, what are they doing really well on? The second is, what is an area that they can find improvement for themselves? And the third is, how could they be led better by us? And we ask for 3 answers to each of those 3 questions. And when we ask for 3, so it's a 3 by 3 format. When we ask for 3, it requires a little bit more cogitation on behalf of the employee to not just like do a 1-sentence response, but asking for the like 3 points actually provokes the person to put a little bit more effort into it, put a little bit more thought into it, and we get gold from those kinds of conversations. So 3 by 3 on the annual reviews creates pathways to find the problems that exist that you don't even realize as an owner. All right. Natalia wanted to know, what were the first 2 points? The first one is, what are they doing really well with? Second one is, where do they need to improve? And we ask them to self-scout. We do the same thing for them. And the third is, how can they be resourced more effectively? All right. Argel, why don't you take over the con and tell a little bit of your story, especially projecting forward, because and I'm going to interrupt at one point to tell a little bit more of why I'm like platforming you in this way. But why don't you kind of get your slides up on the screen, and I think that will help. All righty.
All right, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Perfect. And then can you hear me okay? I think earlier.
No, you're good.
You good? Okay, perfect. All right, well, hi everybody. And Nate, thank you so much for inviting me here. And I'm happy to share what we've done at my firm to, all of your clients who's really on the same boat as me from day one, right? And so just a little bit about me. So I was born in the Philippines, but I grew up in California. I attended University of San Francisco, studied accounting, got a cum laude degree there. And then right after I did my internship at Grant Thornton, serving high net worth individuals. And then for my full-time job, I started my career at Deloitte. Initially in audit, where I was doing tax provisions, and eventually moving on to tax. Initially, I was working with a lot of like partnership in real estate and also in asset management. So I've done a lot of K1s. And then also the later stage of my career there, I was working with multinational companies, conglomerates, really working on things like everything from the tax returns to advisory for companies here in the US, but also all over the world. And so after that, I had a small stint in a startup that I created called Levy, and it was really trying to automate some of these things that our clients deal with every day when it comes to bookkeeping and also tax preparation. And then I went and started an accounting firm, and that's the DTLACPA that I have now, and we are based in Los Angeles.
And one of the things that kind of brought Argel to our attention, again, is conversation at AICPA, but he has built his practice in Los Angeles, and he's been able to keep his staffing costs to a minimum, yet with full-time people. So Argel, before you kind of finish your story, why don't you keep going, because I will have lots to interrupt about.
Yeah, sure. So, I think everyone knows this already. Like the problem that we're facing in the accounting firm world is just becoming more challenging every day, right? There's a huge demand of our time and our skills, and we're busy all year round now, it seems like. And just the labor demand is just so high that there's not enough talent out there, right? And the cost is like really, really high as well. And so, the bigger picture that's happening is really, there's a digital transformation that's happening. It opened up new jobs online and, new career in the creative space. And this was already happening before the pandemic, and it just accelerated it of us going digital and the globalization of the remote workforce. And also within our industry, we just really have a huge staffing problem that's becoming more competitive when it comes to finding someone to work for us, right? Especially at the competitive pricing. And this shortage is really, really affecting our industry. I think according to AICPA, CPA exam candidate is like the lowest in decades. About 75% of current CPAs are going to be retiring in the next 15 years. So there's a lot of demand there, but just not enough supply. And then the third thing that's happening in the macro level is just the cost cutting measure that's happening, right? Like there's high inflation. That's starting to simmer down a little bit, but now we also have like recession fears. So our clients are really, especially the ones that are forward looking, they're looking at their cost. And accounting is just one of those costs that like get cuts first. So they're really price sensitive right now. So we have to be mindful.
Especially with accounting, I think that's the case. That's right. Yeah.
Definitely. And then on top of that, right, to add insult to injury, there's just such an increase in complexity in tax code for the last 10 years. Last 10 years alone, if you look at this slide, almost 25 years. I mean, I wish I was still in school in 2010. So I think being an accountant was a lot easier back then. Um, but then there's more time needed to do these compliance, right? And there's more advisory services that are on demand, and our clients are craving that. But guess what? There's just not enough time. There's just so much compliant work that, advisory becomes, the, in the back seat.
Right, and that's an issue because there's so much conversation, Twitter and different Facebook groups, and in our industry, all the different message boards of advisory, right? Like, move to higher paying clients, advisory clients. Yeah, but like, how the freak am I supposed to do that if I am like buried in compliance work, which a
Yeah.
lot of us are, in the industry. So yeah.
Exactly. It's funny you said that social media, because we also get hit up a lot by our clients like, hey, quick question. I saw it on social media.
Hey,
It's like,
quick question. Love that.
right. So there's really not enough time. And then the problem with that is that the clients just don't see any value in us because we're like commoditized at that point, right? They think we don't have enough time for them. So they go and go to the person that is maybe not as high quality with their work, but they're really good at selling themselves, right? And then even though we're not actively marketing, we can also lose clients just merely not being in front of them.
Yeah, these ERC shops are a perfect example of that. Like these sharks
Oh my
out there
God.
who are, it's a show. Anyway,
Yeah.
go on.
Well, so just a little bit about where we are at with DTLACPA. So with all that things in mind, I was really mindful from day one, right? So with my background from Big Four, I was able to build a process that works for us. And so far, we have double-digit growth. We have 14 employees now. We do everything from tax compliance to advisory and bookkeeping and CFO services. We have really satisfied customers because we are present, we are in front of them, and we have high employee retention because they're also doing not just the grunt work, but they're also experiencing different types because we're upselling different services that are technical, right? In addition to that, we provide our employees 20% above market salary, just really good benefits as well. And from day one, we've been very thoughtful about our cloud tools. Some of the clients that we work with, it varies from different industries.
Those are cool logos.
Yeah, no, really cool. And Float Shuttle is actually a company that during the pandemic, we helped from a startup with 3 employees to 300 employees when they acquired a bigger company. So we were there so we can scale. So not only that, we're pretty technical, we can also scale with our clients. And, that's just because we really have good process in place. And our clients love us. Some of these things that they tell us about being present and giving them more than just the tax work or the bookkeeping, getting the bookkeeping done. But it wasn't always like that, right? Like I started as like one person before. After leaving Deloitte, after my stint at a startup, like I was really trying to figure out how to build a firm, right? And so in 2019, I attended AICPA, and at that time, labor shortage was like the #1 concern in the profession. So I went around, look at like, okay, I came from Deloitte. I have over 10 years of experience working with outsourcing our work to India while I was at Deloitte. Maybe I can replicate that. And so I looked around, see what's out there, and I checked out the companies offshoring in India, and just their approaches didn't give me the peace of mind. It wasn't up to par to the excellence and world class that I was used to when I was at Deloitte. And so I was like, okay, maybe I'll build something in India and eventually build my entire team there. Then I got reacquainted with my best friend in the Philippines through Facebook, and his name was Mark. And during this time, he was based in the Philippines, and he happened to be a headhunter for a $2 billion outsourcing company who's listed in NASDAQ, right? And I was like thinking, okay, maybe I'll give this a try. And at the very least, we can build a BPO and see if it works out there, because I had no idea.
For those who don't know, what does BPO stand for?
It's business process outsourcing.
Right.
And so, I didn't know what kind of talent is over there, but I thought at a minimum, I'm going to retain and practice my Tagalog language again, and if things don't pan out. So this is a picture in 1995,
Wow.
Freshman year. That's me in the middle, 12 years old. And this is Mark right here, who has 15 years of experience, right, in BPO and recruiting. And then Ray, who's also a classmate, is actually going to be joining us very soon as well. He's from Sony with 16-year and veteran and network and security experience. And all of my team, we have 14 employees, all are in the Philippines, and I'm the only one here in the US.
Okay,
And this is it.
so hold on, Argel. This is the inflection point that I think I want to highlight for people. All right. So a lot of you have not ever considered using offshore people. I want to briefly interrupt you, Argel, quickly tell our story here. So I was at a mastermind group 3 years ago and with a bunch of marketing agency owners, and I sat next to this gentleman who ran a marketing agency for HVAC companies all over the US. And as I talked to him, I realized we're pretty similar size, pretty similar scale. He had 42 full-time employees, all based in the Philippines. And here I was with like 12 or 13 at the time. And we had the same payroll. And my mind was blown as he told me about all the different things that they could pull off on behalf of their clients and the ability that they had, because frankly, they just had so many more people at their disposal who were putting in great work. And so he shortcutted something for me, and he was very kind. He offered me his like right-hand person to help me find somebody in the Philippines to work with me. And that could be like our soon operational person. And so I'd always heard about offshoring, and there's great technical knowledge, great like English skills overseas, but like that first leap was the hard one for me. And that's the case for probably a lot of you on this webinar. It's that first dip of the toe into that experience. And once he did that, like I'm not going to go into the whole story of how that all panned out. Now we have 5 people based in the Philippines, and they are like a fully integrated, joyful part of our team. That we could talk a lot about how to manage that, but Argel, carry on, because I want everybody to pay close attention to what Argel is going to talk about next.
Yeah, same here, Nate. Like it wasn't for me when my first hire happened. Like I got really lucky stumbling upon Mark, right? And so I had somebody on the ground.
Who was your childhood best friend? Lucky is not really the same thing, but yes, go ahead.
And then secondly, it took some time for us to find our first hire, right? We had to go through and see the talent. We went with someone who's super talented, but just wasn't there. And so as we went along, we were building our culture. We were trying to find out who's the right people for us, right? And so the other thing that I actually, one of my greatest takeaway of going through this experience is that Philippines is really the perfect match to find talent, especially as I mentioned earlier with digital transformation. The Philippines was a territory of the United States up to World War II, right? They're very proficient in their English, very westernized culture, and there's just a strong government support, right?
I would especially say, in my experience, reading and writing in particular, and there's a bunch of people who are very good and fluent, like spoken word, and you can't even tell they're accentless. But especially reading and writing comprehension, that is a really cultural value.
And I would say too, the outsourcing market in the Philippines is still really new, right? Like we know about the outsourcing in India, but Philippines is still pretty new. There's only 1.3 million employed, and it's 100 million. The population is 100 million, right? The industry is just growing dramatically, and the literacy rate is really high. In addition to that, Big Four has been there also for 7-8 years, right? And so, or actually over a decade that they've been there. And so a lot of the talent that are coming out of the Big Four who just doesn't see a fit working for the Big Four or the mid-sized firms, they really want to join a company that's more than just a paycheck.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and what my experience has been is, culturally speaking, obviously you can paint really over broad brushes when we're talking different cultures, but like there is, and Argel, please like correct me, and white bread Midwesterner over here, but my experience has been, I grew up in DC, melting pot, what have you. There's differences in cultures, right? And there is a cultural value in the Philippines of warmth and loyalty and work ethic that is really remarkable. And we've interviewed a bunch of people and have worked with a bunch of Filipinos. And there's obviously, nuances, and every person is their own person and, shouldn't be placed into a box. But broadly speaking, like our team in the Philippines, they are so loyal, so kind, so delightful to work with. And it's kind of been like every person that we've met there. So Carry on.
I think there's also, we're also talking about work cultures, right? That's so important, right? Like work culture in the US is very different than Europe, right? Yep. And so, we have that kind of similarities as well in the Philippines in terms of the hospitality of being able to like bring their best foot forward, right? So there's that ethics there, their work ethic, which is very important. But yeah, I think definitely outsourcing works. It has worked for my practice. You can certainly build your own offshore team. We did that, but there was a lot of learnings along the way, right? Like opening a local entity, right? Because you need a local entity before you can hire an employee. That takes a long time, costs a lot of money, and it creates this ongoing admin for you to navigate the local benefits, payroll, taxes, and compliance. And then there's also like hiring freelancers. And I think a lot of accountants have that introduction to the Philippines through Upwork, right? Like VA. And so you can certainly do that, and they're affordable, but they're not consistent, and they could vanish abruptly if they find a better opportunity. And it's also hard to build a team full of freelancers, especially if you don't have somebody on the ground. And then you can also, what most traditionally people who are offshoring are hiring a traditional BPO, right? But the traditional BPO model is broken. It's a race to the bottom pricing and race to the
and race to the
bottom
bottom talent. Yeah, yeah.
Exactly. And they care more about cost than quality, which just leads to, greater risk and uncertainty to your reputation, right? Especially I care a lot about my reputation in front of my clients. So definitely I put a pause on that because, larger BPO that are traditionally have worked with big companies, right? They put their employees behind the scene, just crunching numbers, things like that, where that doesn't work for small and medium-sized companies. And so, what is the HeyApril difference of what we're building?
Let me just kind of like bring it out to the forefront. So what Argel is doing now, and this is sort of the first public opportunity that he is, talking about this, is offering to create these shortcuts for everybody on the webinar and those who are interested, and he'll explain that. And we're going to have a discovery meeting here that he'll talk about as well. We'll answer all the questions that are going to come up because there's a lot. But what HeyApril is a new, what's the kind of corp that it is? It's a B Corp,
it's a public benefit corporation.
Yeah, public benefit corporation. That is, the mission is to bring this to the tax and accounting industry in a way that isn't just churning through people and isn't just churning through like the race to the bottom. And I'll shut up and let him tell you about it. But I just want to be clear, those of you who are on this webinar, you have kind of first mover opportunity to work with Argel and his team to like integrate this into your practice, whatever level you're at. So carry on.
Yeah, and I think that's the big difference is that, we take the pain out of offshoring because we've done it, right? We've learned from it and we've been very successful at it. In addition to that, like we really find quality people. One, because I'm from the Philippines and I know the culture. And so we know how to pick candidates. We know how to bridge the two culture, the American culture and the Philippine culture, especially the work culture. And we also attract the best candidates because we're looking for candidates that are not just looking for just getting a paycheck. And because we're mission oriented, we care about our people first, and we care about our employees and the community that they live in. And so right away, they can tell that they're not just working for another BPO company.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, bottom line, let me bring you back to what my friend, his experience and what's our experience. Amazing people at half or less the cost. And the great thing is about some of the tech stack that's available that we have is that we can reach into these markets in ways that we never could before. And it's like only just beginning this process, but like you can pay people over in the Philippines a lot less, and it can, like, for them, their experience, their like cost of living and like the equivalent exchange rate, etc., it could be worth like 5x what it is in the United States, if not more.
And then that's what I said earlier too, that we pay our employees, above market salary, right? And we are able to enjoy a huge profit, but we reinvest that profit. And that's the big difference, right? We're not just driving our employees to the ground, we're hiring more people as we go. We figure out the balance between how many clients they can take, where they can serve the client real well, right? And so when you look at those economics, it's really hard to make those economics work, paying, $80,000 to somebody in the US, and you expect them to, take care of like 100 employees or 100 clients, right? There's just not going to be any customer service if you bury them with work to justify their salary.
Yeah, and Paul, I'm not talking just about the exchange rate. I'm talking about real purchasing power in terms of like standard of living and what like a $3,000 a month, or let's just even say $1,000 a month or $1,500 a month salary can mean to somebody there. It's equivalent of like $7,000, $8,000, $9,000 a month here. So it's a really significant difference.
Right. And there's a question about have I traveled to the Philippines to meet my employees? I have not. Like I've traveled to the Philippines to see Mark, but like as far as my team, we're always on Zoom, but I've never seen them, partly because of COVID and just waiting that out. But the plan is to go over there. And it's a tropical paradise and it's a business expense. So I see no reason why not to. But just going back to the services that we'll provide at HeyApril. So if you became a partner of us, we'll basically take care of everything, right? We will handle all the hiring process, the sourcing, assisting you with the screening, scheduling interviews to complete the paperwork for the job offer. We'll take care of all the HR management, compliance, all the legal and tax and privacy compliance, including employment liability insurance, banking, the deposits, payroll and benefits. So basically your team is employed by our local entity in the Philippines. And so, there's no employment risk to you. And we will also provide IT training, support, onboarding training, professional development, accelerator technical training, and performance review. So we really, take the heavy lifting.
So I'm already getting like real specific questions. I put a link in the chat, taxprohiring.com, that is going to take you to a Zoom meeting registration page. And that's going to be a meeting, not a webinar, where Argel's got like 30 or 40 people, CPAs, that he has sort of like privately kind of been talking to about this. There's also people within our client base that'll be a part of this. And people at this meeting, we're going to like just answer all the questions and go through this. I also want you guys to know I get nothing from like this webinar, what have you. I don't have any ownership stake in HeyApril or anything like this. The genesis of me bringing this to you was hearing from our clients. I like can't handle the lead flow that you're creating at your marketing agency. I can't take on any more clients. And so I gotta cancel. And I hate that as a business owner. And so like this is a very like mercenary, selfish thing for me to be bringing to the marketplace and helping Argel bring, because this is going to be solving for the greatest reason why marketing agency clients fall off is they can't handle new clients. And so like this is going to be an easy button for us here at Tax Pro Marketer to say, talk to Argel and his team. There's a bunch of questions, okay? So let's see, the website, I just created the redirect. Let me put the actual Zoom link. Oh, that's not it. Ha! That was a funny thing I said to my team earlier. That's a Twitter thing. That's embarrassing. Here's that is a man singing opera in grocery stores, if you want to actually pay attention to that. But that is the link. That's so funny. That is the link that you should use, the Zoom link. It's so funny. That's taxprohiring.com should take you to that link there. There's a lot of questions flying through the chat. We might miss them. So for that Zoom meeting, if you're interested, we're going to keep going and keep talking, but we'll also send a follow-up that'll give you the link to that. It's just to answer a few questions. What Argel and I have talked about for this is going to be like, it's going to be a flat rate for people, and you'll pay HeyApril directly, and they'll kind of handle the rest. But that person will be like an independent contractor, but like fully assigned to your team, and they will be fully integrated to your team. But the HeyApril team is going to be working with them, training, and also managing. So there's a small, I'm sorry I'm kind of jumping ahead, but just for the sake of time, Argel, I just want to kind of get this out there. There's going to be an initial cohort of practices that Argel and HeyApril is going to work with. We've set the number at like 10 or 15 of different practices that like there will be an application process, and we will work with that cohort. And in return for being a part of this initial cohort, you're going to get like discounted pricing for the full management, because there's going to be a placement, like there's going to be options for like setting somebody in place for you, and then you take it from there. And then there's options for setting someone in place for you and ongoing support and maintenance and management. You're going to get the ongoing support, maintenance, and management at the you take it from there kind of pricing in this initial cohort. So this is kind of like a, not beta because they've done this, but it's sort of like alpha class cohort for people who want to work with HeyApril to solve this for them. All right. Carry on, Argel.
Right. I'm sure there's a lot more questions, but just keeping it high level so everybody knows kind of how this works is really, once you make that request from us, it's really, really easy, right? We'll do the power search and we'll do the onboarding and do the IT and HR support from there. And we guide you along the way through all of that.
So what are Argel, your chat didn't go to the whole list. He did respond to you, Paul. Yes, his team does tax return prep. They're U.S. tax code trained. This is not, he's even got some senior level people there. So carry on.
Yeah. Yeah, they do U.S. tax return prep. And a lot of these really, again, it requires some training, right? And finding people. So there's a lot of work behind the scene. And that's basically what you're going to be able to leverage with us, is that we've been through that. But just highlight some of the benefits here. A lot of them are really obvious, right? So one, having a dedicated, saving time in the interview process, finding a good match so that you find talent, but you also retain them. The peace of mind, right? That, you have a partner in us, that if you do find somebody and they vanish, like we're here to, find a replacement. And like I mentioned, if we do a good job, they shouldn't be, churning, right? They should be staying. And just the overall convenience that we're able to bring for you in taking care of all the back end stuff that takes a lot of time and money. And if that's not enough, it's really the 60 to 80% in salary that you're saving, which is a game changer, right? Because now you can start thinking about, okay, how do I position my company, my firm, and put the best foot forward and help more clients? You can have a combination of people in the US that are more advisory and then team in the Philippines, or, you can just have whatever works for your company. But one thing is for sure, you do need to hire more people. The work is just piling up, and there's, you can do it yourself, but like Nate said, we're just a bona fide consultant, freelance consultant, if we don't try to grow our firm. And I've been there, and I know how much this really changed my practice significantly.
Right. And so, Madeline asked about the client's privacy, socials, and such. I mean, that's part of what HeyApril is going to manage on your behalf, is policies and such with the team. I will say that's not ever really been an issue for us with our team. I think there's a strong fear of crossing those kind of boundaries, because this is an opportunity for the folks in the Philippines, working with a practice that's a professional practice, especially they're not going to be cogs in a big corporate machine, but they get to join a team that will care for them. We care for our Filipino staff. This is part of the synergy that I think Argel discovered with us here at Tax Pro Marketer, is he heard about how our relationship with our team in the Philippines, and they're fully integrated into our flows. We have leadership there. It's they are fully portfolioed within our company, so to speak. And they, our team has said we don't know anybody like you, all of our friends who work for BPOs or different places, in the US, you guys treat us like we're real people. That's a game changer. And so the HeyApril team is going to help you in those little things that will help you kind of create that loyalty, and your team will be so loyal to you when you treat them with respect.
And I just want to add too that this is already industry, outsourcing is already an industry practice, right? It's already happened in Big Four 12 years ago, and it's, trickling down now to small firms, right? So a lot of these things that we're asking about, clients' privacy, there's standards out there already for that.
Right.
In addition to that, you guys have seen, big conglomerate companies going into Philippines, right? I call Chase, and I'm talking to somebody in the Philippines. Even QuickBooks, I call them, right? And so that's already happening in industry-wide. But just like anything else in any job there is, you really can't stop collusion or any of those things, fraud, right? So you wanna upfront put a lot of investment in finding the right people, right? Because they're the best people to protect all the private information that, you can only do so much with policies and procedures. But that shouldn't stifle us from moving forward as a firm.
Yeah, talk about this slide, the opportunity cost you're talking about here, because I think this is really, I think people
Yeah,
get this kind of intuitively, but tease it out.
Well, the return on investment is really simple. I mean, you hire somebody in the Philippines, per hire, they're making 3 times more than what you hire them for, right? So at a minimum, right? And that could go 5x depending on the type of services that you're providing. So the ROI is there. In terms of the opportunity cost, that's your time as the owner, right? If you're just offering, say, 2 months out of the year consulting, when somebody in your team can take over that's like a quick $50,000 saving just for that alone, right? And so that could be more if you're providing a lot of client facing, and you should be charging these advisory services instead of doing the prep work, instead of giving out your services for free, like the consulting for free, because you're buried in trying to just get the work done. And I've been there, so I'm definitely transforming my practice to be more advisory and having a team in the Philippines that can do a lot of the stuff that is needed to be done, right? The grunt work. I've also have been training them to identify things we can upsell for advisory services. So there's so much more you can do when you have capacity.
We got the inevitable circular 230 question, Argel.
Are there any obstacles to non-US workers with circular 230? Again, similarly, when I was at Deloitte, we dealt with circular 230. As long as you have the proper compliance, as long as you're communicating to the clients, having them especially with individual returns, right? Signing off on that their information is going to be shared overseas. As long as you have them signed, those are in compliance. And in a lot of ways as well, it doesn't have to be, if it's for corporation or businesses, it doesn't have to be too obvious in your engagement letter. The thing that we have to think about as practitioner is that we should never lead and say, oh, my team is in the Philippines. Oh, my team is here and there. You should lead with your value, right? And with the clients ask, where's your team located? We're very transparent about that. And the what I showed you earlier as far as testimonials, those are testimonials for our Filipino employees. So they know that we're working with employees. And I think that's the game changer, right? You don't want to put them on the back end. You want to integrate them to your team, right? Because at the end of the day, your client just care about getting the work done and that you're there for them.
And to be clear, most of your team works US hours. Our team, there's ways that sometimes with certain employees we have to some of them are asynchronous and they're working kind of regular Filipino hours, but there are people that are they're up in the night and they're working US hours, and that's a very common practice in the Philippines.
Yeah, but for our practice, we made the decision to
Not
work on their time because they're the one doing the work, so we want them the most productive. So why I want them to work graveyard shift? But those are available. But to me, nothing that the clients need requires in 2 hours, right? And so there's that overlap that they're here in the afternoon and they're talking to clients. And if necessary, if they can accommodate the Zoom meeting, they will book it at 11 and they'll be up until, midnight to jump on that meeting, but it's not often.
Yeah.
But yeah, so hopefully, we can help you grow your remote team effortlessly. And we would love to answer more questions and get onto the details of how these things work next week at the taxprohiring.com. And Nate shared the link there as well.
Yep. So the redirect, I just put it into place this morning, so it might not have populated across the different zones, in the way that URL redirects. So the ugly link is in the chat for the meeting. And so what's going to happen during that meeting is we're just going to it's going to be a meeting. It's not going to be a webinar. Everybody's going to have their camera and microphone available. We're going to mute everybody at first. We'll kind of go through more of this and we'll start just taking questions. And then after that meeting, you're going to get an application. In terms of pricing, by the way, it's actually really inexpensive. It's very equivalent to what I'm actually paying my team already in the Philippines. This is not like a $7,000-8,000 a month investment. Far from it. This is going to be a lot. It's going to be very, very, like, the ROI is going to be immediately apparent to you when you have like well-trained, effective workers in your practice that you can scale with that are not going to cost you US rates. I mean, this is going to be a game changer if you embrace it. So again, in that meeting, we will give people the opportunity to fill out the application, and we're only going to work with like the first 10 or 15 practices that kind of meet some agreements that we're going to ask. Because Argel and his team are going to be putting a lot into this initial cohort, there might be bumps along the road, but Argel and his team are going to learn how to lead other CPA practices in creating what they've created, and therefore you get a great deal. Therefore, like you're going to get more attention and better pricing even than it's going to be publicly available after busy season. So next summer, HeyApril is probably going to make a bigger splash, but this season, like, get in this initial cohort and it's going to be awesome. All right. Yeah. I think this is awesome. I am just personally really excited to kind of share the experience that we've had here for the last 3 or 4 years at Tax Pro Marketer, because if it's anything like what we've experienced, it's going to be just an awesome game changer for you in your practice. So I encourage everybody to register for that meeting. The link is going to go out tomorrow. You're going to get like a replay link for this, and you're going to get an opportunity to join that meeting. If you're not able to make that meeting, you'll get a replay for it as well. But we are going to be sharing the application during that meeting. So do what you can to set aside time if you're interested. If you want to grow in this way, set aside that time in your calendar to get the link, and I think it's going to be a really interesting, awesome development for you in your practice. All right, any other final words, Argel?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to say that, like, when I met you, Nate, really what drew me to the team, other than like your technical ability, is really you guys having a team in the Philippines. And to me, there's like a lot of alignment there already. And so those are the type of people we want to work with in terms of this first cohort, right? We want to be able to find those alignment. And so if you attend the meeting next week, then we can have a more open conversation about the whole thing. Again, this is just we're just starting this out. And so it's not going to be perfect from day one. We figured it out for us, and we're finally opening it up for others to have access. And so, think about those things as well when you decide where you're at with your practice.
Yep. And if the links aren't working, again, I apologize. That's on me for procrastinating and getting that redirect set up only this morning. But there will be an email that'll go out that will have the active link. So, sorry about that, Stephanie. I don't know what's going on with that. You'll get the open link, and you have a whole week to prepare. So just make sure you set aside that time on your calendar. And I think we'll have like at least 50, 60 people on that meeting as well, because of Argel's kind of network and the Tax Pro Marketer client base that's in there. So for sure, put your name on that list, and we'll talk more next Tuesday at this time. So thanks everybody for joining, and we will see you Tuesday, I hope. Alrighty. Thanks, Argel. Good job. Oh, wait, Argel.
Yeah.
Looks like open questions. Oh, you already answered them.
Another question.
Kyle wants to know about TOA. Yeah, TOA
What
Global.
is HeyApril's competitive differentiation for a company like TOA? I think it was really the mission base. Like, we're the first public benefit corporation, meaning that, like, on our charter, right, we are more than just like profit driven, right? So that's first, and it's the first public benefit corporation outsourcing company by accountants for accountants, right? And so this is already in our DNA from day one. So there's a lot of like kind of alignment with me being Filipino, also being from the Big Four and having a lot of experiences in this space. And the company in total, their owner is from Australia, and so I mean, there's really not much to say about that in terms of how they run their business, but they also come from like a bigger traditional BPO model, right? And so in terms of like how different, I mean, I think it's just really, it comes down to the type of talent that you're going to get at the end of the day. right? Because we're very selective about who we hire and to match it with.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the key differences with TOA and some of these other PPO companies is they're massive and they have kind of a machine. This is going to be a lot more of a concierge kind of experience where you're going to have Argel and his team who are doing this in the trenches, kind of building out SOPs alongside you and helping you with the little things for managing your team and like handling payment and all of the different things that arise with working overseas. What do you do if a power outage occurs? Like what's the process in place for that? What do you do with language differences or what have you? And they're all English speaking, but like just some of these cultural different Filipino holidays, US holidays, like things like that you have to kind of work your way through that HeyApril just kind of shortcuts through the process for you. So,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
All righty. Thanks again. And we'll see you guys on Tuesday.
All right. Bye.
All righty. Bye-bye.